Hello. We are back with part 2 of Chainmail. So we ended off on indirect fire, which is firing like upwards to go over something to hit a target that's further away. And we're going to go to cover. Soft cover such as brush, woods, waist-high fences, and walls will reduce missile casualties by 1/2. Drop all fractions. Woods and overhead cover such as roofs prevent all indirect fire. If indirect fire is possible, then casualties will not be reduced by cover. So, movable mantlets and walls with arrow slits make targets behind them, including missile troops firing through such slits arrow-proof unless indirect fire is possible. So this is saying that you can shoot over certain things, but not through other things. So let's say there's a wall, you can shoot over the wall with indirect fire. But if they have a roof over their head, you can't use indirect fire because the arrow would just hit the roof. You'd have to shoot them dead on. If there's a wall in front of them and a roof above them, then you can hit them with arrows. So that makes sense. Throwing axes and spears. These missile weapons are treated as any other missile weapons, except they may fire only once per turn. They may always fire at the enemy troops charging them, and they may not fire indirectly. So if someone's charging you, then you always get to attack. They may fire only once per turn. Oh, so they can only fire once per turn anyway. So basically you can move your attack to earlier in the turn, like at the half move, so that you can always hit them before they reach you if they're charging. And they can't fire indirectly, so they can't be shot at an angle. That makes sense. Catapult fire. I thought this was pretty fun, the way the catapult works. So you have a minimum and maximum range for light and heavy catapults in the area that they hit. For the hit area, cut a circular plastic disc of the diameter stated above. All figures wholly or partially under the circular hit area are killed. For the effective catapult hits on other artillery pieces, structures, etc., see the section entitled Sieges. So you make a disc that's 2 inches across or 3.5 inches across, and then you lay it on top of the target that you're shooting at, and everything underneath that disc dies. Now, this is where this makes perfect sense, but then it gets more complicated. Rate of fire. Light catapults fire every other turn, heavy catapults every third turn, provided they are fully crewed and have not been moved during the previous 2 or 3 turns, as the case may be. Full crew and reduction in rate of fire for partial crews are shown below. 4 crew fire normal, 3 crew fire requires 1 extra turn, 2 extra turns, 3 extra turns. So if your catapult's under a volley from archers, and you lose 2 of your crew at the catapult, then you gotta spend 2 extra turns per time you fire the catapult. Additional crew above 4 do not add to the rate of fire. Only trained crew may operate artillery, so you can't have just random troops walk up and take the spots. Arc of fire, 45 degrees left or right. So again, you want to get out your protractor. Indirect fire. All catapult fire is considered indirect and incurs no penalty because of this. There's no reduction in range. Cover. Any substantial overhead cover negates the effect of catapult fire, so if they're under a roof. Method of fire. The player firing the catapult must call the range by stating the distance in inches he is firing and how far left or right the missile is to fall, subject to the 45-degree arc of fire limitation. Triangulation is then made with the missile falling along the long side of the triangle, the number of inches called. So you could use like trig functions here to make sure that it's within 45 degrees, but you can just lay a protractor down. You just mark, in this case, you mark 28 inches forward, and then you measure 8 to the side. You can just eyeball a 90-degree angle, or use your protractor if you're really picky. Go 8 inches down and make a dot, and then use your ruler as like a line, and then put your protractor on top. And if this line is less than or equal to 45 degrees from this line along the protractor, then it's a valid shot. Now, when I first looked at this, something I thought was, well, you have 28 inches forward and then 8 inches to the side. This is probably going to be longer than 30 inches, which is the maximum range for a light catapult, right? So the actual line of fire may be longer than the range in this case, because that's how triangles work, Pythagorean theorem. But I think it only takes into account this. The pixel that was period, that's fine. I think it only takes into account the 28 inches forward. And then you can go left or right as long as it's within 45 degrees. Fire optional. See, this is where it confuses me a little bit. Where it says missile hit area falls at 28 degrees along the long side of the triangle, or 28 inches along the long side of the triangle. So, wouldn't it hit like right here? So you'd really have to sit there and like calculate. I don't know. I'd probably house rule it to just be 28 feet hit forward and then left or right, or you can be a little bit more direct and just put your protractor here and then have your ruler and then swing it left or right until you hit and see a target you want to hit. It's probably easier than fucking around with a triangle and trig functions and Pythagorean theorem. Fire optional. Roll 2 different colored dice. One color is for an overshoot and the other is for an undershoot. To decide which number you use, you take the highest of the two. This is in inches shown by dice spots. If they tie, then the rock lands at the specified range. This method is simple but effective. So, if you roll 2d6, whichever's higher is the miss, but if they're equal, then it just goes exactly where you want it to go. It's actually surprisingly simple. So far, I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on this. So, give me a moment to make sense of this in my head. So, horseback archers can do split moves. Only archers can take advantage of pass-through fire when it passes through their range. I don't know how it works if you pass within melee range. I really don't know how that works. Maybe you get... I'd probably house rule that to be like, yeah, you get a pass-through attack with melee. So far, I only read about halfway through like the pure Chainmail rules before I skipped to the fantasy supplement. And catapults, well, you just take a protractor, take a ruler, choose a spot, roll 2 different dice, see where it lands relative to where you're trying to hit. Then you put down a disc, and anything under the disc is dead. Is there anything I'm missing? Let's mark this so we can come back to it. Yeah, formations, movement, just refer to the chart to see how far you can move. Terrains. Yeah, I mean, I'm only 9 pages in. Gunpowder weapons. Arquebusiers. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Regardless of the armor classification of their target, arquebusiers will kill any figure they hit. When firing, arquebusiers roll an accuracy die for each man and use the following hit table. So if they're 12 to 18 inches away, for each man, not for each miniature. So you have to roll 10 times for... Well, I don't really like that system because let's say you kill 5 within a miniature. What are you going to do with the other 5? You know? So, if your miniature has 20 arquebusters and their miniature has 20 targets, then you can just roll once. Rate of fire is like a heavy crossbowman. Heavy crossbowmen can shoot once every other round. Or every other turn, because they have to reload. Okay. Arc of Fire is treated as normal for missile-armed footmen. What's the Arc of Fire work? Oh, that's just saying left or right. Indirect fire, no indirect fire is permitted, yeah, you can't fire a gun up. Cover. The target is up to 1/2 concealed by hard cover, trees, walls, rocks, etc. Deduct 1 from the score rolled on the accuracy die. The target is over 1/2 concealed by hard cover, deduct 2 from the score. So if they're over 120 yards away and they're over 1/2 concealed, then you can't hit them. Arquebusiers who fire while their weapon is resting on a strong support add 1 to the score rolled on the accuracy die. So you can't actually hit them with a 6 if they're resting their weapon on a wall or a rock or something. Cannon. 3 classifications of cannon are considered. They are light field gun, 30 inches range, heavy field gun, 36 inches range, and bombards, 42 inches range. These weapons are usually used only in sieges. So they fire the same as catapults. They have the same arc left or right as catapults. Only bombards may fire directly. You can't fire cannons into woods. For the effective cannon fire on specific targets of wood or stone. So he's like, oh, so if you're hitting a wall, then there's a whole section for that. Method of fire. Fires in a straight line to a target specified by the player firing. Exception is the bombard. See the rule below. A wooden dowel is placed at the muzzle of the cannon. A dowel, I had to look this up, is like a thin piece of wood that you get at a hobby store. It's placed at the muzzle of the cannon. And a 6-inch variation measure is placed at the other end of it. This is where it gets confusing. This is where I was talking. I thought this was under catapults, but no. So, a wooden dowel is placed at the muzzle of the cannon. See, this is where it confuses me, because what does that even mean? Okay, let's look up what a dowel looks like. Yeah, see, it's like a little thin little piece of wood, like that. A wooden dowel is placed at the muzzle of the cannon, and a 6-inch variation measure is placed at the other end of it, the target end. At this time, the end must pass directly over, rest on, or point to the specific target. The center of the variation measure is placed I don't understand this. So what it's saying, the way I'm picturing this, right, is so you have your cannon, let's say this is the cannon, right? And we're looking top down, so the wheels don't really make sense, but whatever. So what I'm thinking is you put a dowel here, like this, and then you have another dowel like this. I did read ahead. And so the variation dowel is this one, and it's split into sections. And this one must pass directly over, rest on, or point to the specific target. So like this one has to like rest over the target, and I guess you put the protractor here. So it has to be within 45 degrees, which is like this. So within this range you put a dowel, and at the end you put the variation dowel, and then it varies. The center of the variation measure is placed at the far end of the firing dowel. Yeah, right. So the center of this is the variation. And this is the firing. So the middle of the variation dowel is at the end of the firing dowel. The center of the variation measure is placed at the far end of the firing dowel. The variation measure is marked off in 1.5 inch segments. So 1.5, 3, so yeah, that would be a 6 inch dowel. And number from 1 to 6 is illustrated below. So this would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, if I didn't read this ahead, I would have no idea what I'm doing. Die is rolled by the player firing the cannon, and the end of the dowel is then moved to the number on the variation measure, which corresponds to the number rolled in the die. So let's say you rolled a 6. Rolled 6. Then this line right here, the dowel, you take this and you point it. Point it towards 6, right? In this case, it wouldn't actually reach all the way, like reach right here. Because again, Pythagorean theorem. Procedure represents the variation cannonballs, regular gun barrels, and windage. So you use this dowel, this 6 inch dowel, as like a firing variation. So whatever you roll on a d6 tells you how you vary, and then you move the dowel. And the dowel, the firing dowel, is here. The length of the firing dowel will correspond to the maximum length of the cannon which it represents. So let's say for example that we're using a light field gun, right? So if we extend this down, so we have one dowel that's 30 inches. And we have one dowel that's 6 inches. This is the variation dowel here, and this is the firing dowel. And this one, as shown before, is marked like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so this gets put at the end of this, as we showed before. The length of the firing dowel corresponds to the maximum length of range of the cannon which it represents. Each is colored alternatively white and black to represent the flight and bounces of a cannonball. Before placing the dowel, the player firing must state whether he's firing short or long. All figures that are touched by the named color on the dowel are eliminated. The color sections of the dowel read from muzzle to roll. So this is if you fire a cannon, right? First of all, you have the variation dowel, so it can go left or right because of variations in the wind and the barrel and the distribution of the gunpowder. But also, when you shoot a cannon, it doesn't just hit someone in the front row. It hits and then it bounces, and it keeps rolling, and it hits more people. So this is what this is trying to represent. So we have the 30-inch firing dowel. So white is short, black is long. So let's use red and blue. Blue is short and red is long. So in this case, we mark our firing dowel. 16 inches, so that'd be like to right here. This is all blue. Then we have 6 inches, 3 inches, and 5 inches. So 6 inches, 6 inches of red, 3 inches of blue, 5 inches of red. So this is red, and this is blue. So again, you lay your dowel down and you say you're shooting short or long. And if you're shooting short, then you hit everything under the blue. If you say you're shooting long, then you should hit everything under the red. And it's kind of funny. You have to say that whether you're shooting short or long before you place the dowel. So I guess that's to simulate an actual cannoneer, not knowing the exact range like you would as a player of the game. So, again, let's say we're hitting 6. We're aiming for 6. Okay. We're aiming here. The variation says we go to 6 because we roll a 6. And before we place the dowel, okay, so the first thing we have to do is we got to the artillery phase of the turn. We have to state, before we start any of this, whether we're shooting short or long. So let's create a little step-by-step here. So we say we're going to shoot short. Then we place the dowel. Our dowel is going to be blue, red, blue, red. And then we place this one at the end. And then we roll a d6. Say we roll a 2. Step 1, step 2, we roll 2. So now we move this to 2. It's an arrow. So now we get our dowel going like this. Towards 2. And it doesn't reach all the way because, again, Pythagorean theorem. So, actually, is this? Who cares? So now we know we hit here. We said we're shooting short. So now short is blue. Extend this down so you can see both of these. And the scale is off because this would be 5 times longer than this. So the variation would really only be a very small amount. And then, since we said we're shooting short, anything here and anything here that the dowel touches, so not this whole area, but like just along this line, anything here and anything here that is touched by this dowel dies. Cool. Yeah, if I didn't read this part ahead, I would have no idea what I'm doing. So hopefully we'll have fun when we get to the later parts, which I didn't read. Any terrain features which interpose with any section of the dowel stop the flight of the cannonball at that point. These terrain features include high ground, barricades made of substantial material, wood planks or stone, trees, etc. Objects the height of a man will stop the flight of the cannonball if they are substantial and fall within the color section named for hits. A body of water will likewise stop the flight of the cannonball if it is passed over by a section of the dowel colored the color named for hits. So, along this dowel, blue is when it's touching the ground or at man height. So it's like, so you can imagine you can shoot your cannon. If you're shooting short, it bounce, 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 woo, bounce, and then kind of stops. Whereas if you're shooting long, then shoot, and it hits here, and then it bounces and rolls, and then bounce and rolls, and then it kind of goes off. Right? So, if there's water anywhere in this blue, so let's make the water purple. If there's water here, then the cannon stops. Or if there's a tree here and we're shooting long, then it hits the tree and then it bounces off. It doesn't hit anything past it. But if there's a guy standing right in front of the tree, it would hit him. Right? So there's like a little stick man here. He would get killed. Oh, so a water won't stop it in the first section. So actually, how do I make a bigger? Okay, so let's say we have our dowel again, and blue, blue, red, red. This part, the cannon is assumed to be flying level. It hasn't actually touched the ground yet. Here, it's bouncing. So we can imagine it hits here and then bounces up way over this, and hits this, and then drills off. Whereas a red cannon would go, I guess, like way up here and then like cut right across here, then bounce, then bounce. If that makes any sense? So here, the cannon is going level, so it doesn't touch the water if this is water. But if it's a tree, it'll hit the tree. And here, it won't touch the water if there's water, but if there's a tree, it'll hit the tree. Player decides to fire. Here's an example. Player decides to fire a heavy field gun at the exact center of an advancing enemy pike square. The target is close, so the player elects to call white. He places the dowel, lays the variation measure at its end, and rolls the die. The number rolls 4, so the shot goes straight. The target is 26 feet distance and 8 feet deep. So the full 3 inches of the second white section and the full 1 inch of the third section falls upon it. All figures touched by the white section of the dowel, including figures not named as the target, even friendly troops, are removed as casualties. So yes, you can friendly fire with this. So you got to be careful when you're shooting that this variation does not touch any friendly units. If you're shooting into melee, it's like, well, I'll aim for his troops. His troops are right here. Your troops are right here. Put the dowel down. Here's the middle. And like, oh, I'll shoot here. Well, if you roll a 1, your shot's gonna go and kill all your dudes. So that's not good. Melee. Just get an idea of what we're getting into. Melee casualties will be determined by rolling certain numbers of dice and evaluating the scores for the combatants from each side of the combat tables given herein. I think these are the combat tables that are used by original D&D 0th edition. Melee casualties will be determined by rolling certain numbers of dice and evaluating the scores for the combatants from each side of the combat tables given herein. See Appendix A. Okay, let's look at Appendix A. Oh, these are going to be sideways, aren't they? The problem with this PDF is that when you get to the later pages, they're sideways. And ironically, those are the pages that are important for D&D, so it's pretty unfortunate. Let's see if we can find Appendix A. SE reference stand, jousting matrix. Appendix B. Here's Appendix A. Okay. Oh, okay. So if you have a Lightfoot versus a Lightfoot, -1 die per man, 6 kills. Let's actually grab a picture of this. So we have that over here. Go back to where we were. Even drag this out. Okay. Okay. Melee casualties will be determined by rolling certain numbers of dice and evaluating the scores for the combatants from each side of the combat tables given herein. Determined by rolling certain numbers of dice, so you roll more or less dice. It's not this. So I thought when I looked at this, I thought it was -1 on the die per person, but it's -1 die per person. Evaluating the scores for the combatants from each side on the combat tables given herein. Tables of troop classification. Again, these guys are a special class. Like, here's all the different types. You have Vikings, Turks, Normans, Magyars, Mongols. Oh, but the Swiss and Landsknecht, those guys are a special class. I really don't get it. I mean, it's fine if Gary's just infinitely interested in Swiss or Landsknecht units. It's totally fine. He wasn't expecting people to look at this as some kind of historical monument, you know. Every single RPG ever made being based off of Chainmail. Just like the Swiss units, so it's totally fine. We've got Lightfoot, missile troops, Landsknecht, peasants, crews. Crews like crews of catapults. Heavyfoot, Norman, Saxon, Turf, Vikings. I'm not very historically knowledgeable, so I couldn't really tell you much about these individual troops or how accurate this is, so I'm just going to go with it. Light horse, medium horse, heavy horse. Charge. So now we get the explanation of what charge is. Charge move is permitted only when melee contact is expected during some portion of the turn. Oh, so you can't charge just to go faster, you can only charge if you're going to charge into combat. When a unit moves a charge move, it must move it. When a unit moves a charge move, it must move at normal speed on the following turn. So you can only charge one turn, then normal speed, then charge, then normal speed. Cavalry charges must be in a relatively straight line. Up to a maximum of a 45-degree turn curve is allowable. So again, get out your protractor. Victorious charging units must continue to move out of the balance of their charge movement in the direction first indicated. Victorious charging units must continue to move out of the balance of their charge move in the direction first indicated, providing they attain victory before melee or during the first round of melee. So if you charge into combat and you win, you gotta keep charging. But if you don't win, then you're in the middle of a tough fight, then you stop charging. That's how I read that. Missile troops. Missile troops interspace with other footmen forming a defensive line may refuse combat, move back 3 feet out of melee range. However, if the other footmen who are meleeed are killed or driven away, the missile troops must fight if the attacker is able to continue his charge move. So you can move back your rangers from the footmen, allow the footmen to take the brunt of the charge, but if those charging units kill all the footmen, then it doesn't matter, the rangers gotta fight anyway, because they're gonna keep charging into the rangers. Melee resolution. After both players have rolled the number of dice allotted to them for their meleeing troops by the combat tables, casualties are removed and morale for both opponents is checked. Let's look at this. Trying to figure out where it says like how many dice you start with. What exactly this means. Because right now this is total nonsense to me. You can tell this is about where I kind of dropped off, was melee combat. Casualties are removed and morale for both opponents is checked. Post-melee morale. The side with fewer casualties determines the positive difference between their losses and those suffered by the enemy. This number is multiplied by the scores. Okay, so let's do this on Paint. So let's say we have side A, side B. Side B lost 5. Well, actually, let's say they lost 5, and that's 5 times 20 is 100. They lost 100. And these guys lost 40. Side with fewer casualties, which is black. Black determines the positive difference between their losses and those suffered by the enemy. So, whatever the difference is, but positive. So, that would be 60. This is multiplied by a die roll. So, let's say it's a 4. Equals 240. Kinda went off the page a little bit. There we go. The side with the greater number of surviving troops. So this is different than less casualties. So let's say this group had 200 and lost 40. 200 and lost 40, so that's 160. Let's say this had 500 and lost 100, so that's 400. Size, but the greater surviving troops who are involved in the melee determines the positive difference between his survivors and enemy troops who are involved in the melee. Counting by type. So let's say they're all light footmen. So this is 240 times 4 equals 960. Yep. Again, we get 1, 2, and 4. I guess it tells us there at some point there was a step 3 here that got axed. Both sides' total list scores arrived at steps 1 to 3 above, and the side with the lower total reacts as follows. So in this case, we have 960. This is confusing. So we total the scores, so we have 249,960. The side with the lower score reacts as follows. So I don't know if it wants me to take the difference between these two, so it would be like 960 minus 240. Or if it says just take this score or this score. It doesn't say subtract or take the difference. So it says both sides total their scores. Oh no, it does say difference here. Right here. So in this case, 240 has the lower score than 960, so the difference is 720, which is way above 100. So I should color this black. So 960 minus 240, 720. Black surrenders. So that's how it works. This is really confusing because what can happen here is it says to take the difference. But in this case, the side that had the side with fewer casualties determines the positive difference between their losses and those suffered by the enemy. So they had less casualties. So difference is 60. Numbers multiplied with the score of a die roll until noted 240. Side with the greater number of surviving troops who were involved in the melee determines the positive difference between his survivors and enemy troops who were involved in the melee. It definitely feels like there's the missing step, or this just was not thought out very well. Because side with fewer casualties could be the same side with the greater number of surviving troops. Because let's say okay, so I took a little bit, and I think I got this down. So when it says the side with fewer casualties, the side with the greater number of surviving troops, that means that like if you have, do black and blue again. So if you have, this side has 500 troops and lost, I don't know how to do this. Let's say we have 500 and lost 40. Then we have this side which lost 100 and had let's say they're down to 100. This side has 500 and then lost 40, so it went down to 460. Now, the way it's written, it says a side with fewer casualties. Well, this had fewer casualties. So, this side. And the side with a greater number of surviving troops. Well, this also has greater number of surviving troops. So, that one. And it's like, both sides total the scores. And it's like, well, only one side did it. No. What it's saying is that it's just saying choose one side and the other side. So the side with fewer casualties is this side, and then the side with the greater number of surviving troops, that's just the other side. Wait. Side with fewer casualties. So this is really confusing. I would just do it. The side that did better in the fight is number 1, and the side that did worse is number 2. So the side with fewer casualties determines a positive number between their losses and those losses suffered by the enemy. This is 60. And then we multiply this by our die roll. Let's make it 1 this time, so we get 60. Now, the side with a greater number of surviving troops are involved in the melee. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, because the side with fewer casualties is the side is the number of the greater surviving troops. So this part right here is just wrong. So now I have to figure out which side does it mean to be the winner and the loser. Let's start with die roll. If this is supposed to be the winning side, it's kind of unfair that they have to go by a die roll. But okay, whatever. Side with the greater number of, let's just say this is casualties. Determines the positive difference between his survivors and the enemy troops who are involved. This doesn't make any sense. I even stopped and thought about it and then came back, and this doesn't make any sense. So I would just house roll this whole thing. Both sides tell their scores right, some of the lower total reacts as follows. If this makes sense to you and you want to explain it, then please do so in the comments, because I don't get it at all. Melee is involving less than 20 troops per side, double all totals. Example, 10 heavy horse attack 20 heavy footmen, killing 8 and losing 2 of their own. Okay, here's an example. So we'll try and follow the example. So 10, let's just do, we have 10 heavy horse, and we have 20 heavy foot. So these and this is minus 2, which equals 8. The heavy horse has less casualties, so they get 6 times the die roll for critical kills. So we get 8 minus 2, it's 8. 6 times a die roll, which is 3, which equals 18. Okay. Okay. To this, the heavy horse add a morale rating of 9. To this, the heavy horse add a morale rating of 9 times their 8 survivors. To this, the heavy horse add a morale rating of 9 times their 8 survivors. But they don't have more surviving troops. But they did lose less. Okay. So the heavy horse adds 9 times 8, which equals 90. Okay. Heavy foot have more survivors, so they score 4. 12 minus 8 plus morale rating of 5 multiplied by their 12 survivors equals 60. Heavy foot have more survivors, true. So they score 4. So they score 4. So yeah, what if you get 10 minus 2 equals 8 and 20 minus 12 or minus 13? What if this was 20? If you had 20 minus 13 equals 7, what would you do? So, yeah, I have no idea. I don't understand the system at all for morale. As much as I like the concept of morale, as I said earlier, I don't understand this. So if you understand it, please, in the comments, leave how you understand it or what your house rules are. Comment below. Okay. So let's continue. Flank attack. Units attacking from the flank are at the next higher class. A heavy foot equals armored foot, and heavy horse equals +1 on each die. Rear attack. Units which attack from the rear deliver casualties without receiving any in return. In addition, such troops receive a bonus stated above for flank attack. So if you attack from the rear, you get both the flank bonus and the opponent can't actually attack back. Retreat and rout. Troops forced back. I had to crack my back. Back in retreat or rout, with backs to the enemy, must remain unmoved on the following turn while they rally. So if you run away, then you're going to be in a big disorganized bundle, and you gotta spend another move to rally up and get back in formation. If they are attacked while rallying, a die must be rolled in order to determine if they manage to quickly rally or continue to retreat or rout. If they fail to rally when attacked, casualties are suffered by them while the enemy takes none in return. Attacker only rolls dice in the combat tables. A score of 1 to 2 is required to rally when attacked. It's kind of interesting that it uses a low score here instead of a high score on a d6. Continue retreat or rout. If a retreated or routed unit is forced or voluntarily continues to move, they must be diced for in order to rally them in later turns. If the required score is not made, the unit must immediately be moved again. Another turn movement noted on the records and must be checked again on the following turn. Any unit that retreats or routs off the table is removed from play for the remainder of the game. Retreat or rout. No attack. If a retreat or routed unit is forced or voluntarily continues to move, fire scores on the must immediately be moved again. So if they've retreated for 3 turns and you don't roll a 6, then they die, basically. So if you have the first turn that they're running away, well, it just says right here, so it's a compound that's used paint. But the first turn they run away is just normal. They take a turn, they can come back. Second turn, they have to roll a 3 to 6, or else they can't even stop and rally. They have to keep running. On a third turn, they have to roll 6, or they keep running. Well, the third turn they have to roll 6, or they just die. So if they retreat for too long, they just die, because they run away forever, or they leave the battlefield. Miscellaneous melee information. Missiles cannot be fired into a melee. So they don't even use like what AD&D uses, where there's like rules for whether or not you hit your allies. You can't even fire into a melee. All types of troops are considered to control the space of 1 inch on either side of them to stop infiltration. So you can't just march your miniatures inside of the enemy lines, because they control space on either side of them. 1 inch is 10 yards, so they control 10 yards to the left or right. Units within 3 inches of a melee may be drawn into it if the player to whom they belong so desires. However, the unit that joins the melee cannot have been moved over 1/2 of its normal movement during that turn. The unit joining the melee may move up to 6 inches into battle. So this is how I was talking about how I would house rule pass-through attacks so that it works for melee if they're in melee range. It basically has that rule. It says if you control them in your units and they're in melee range, you can choose to attack or not, but only if you've only moved half of your movement. If you moved over half your movement, then you can't. And you can move up to 6 inches into battle. So if they're 3 inches away, you can move to the side a little bit of them if you want. Maybe you try to get a flank or something sneaky, but if they're in a line, you can't really flank them. Melee options for added realism. Prisoners. Before the losing side falls back from a melee, both players roll a die to determine if any prisoners are taken from the losing side. Both players roll a die to determine if the losers retreating or rooting back as units automatically loses either 1 prisoner or 2 prisoners. I guess root is like just running for your life, whereas retreat is just backing up, regardless of the further outcome of the dice score. Different systems for prisoners. So if foot beats horse, then you add the winner and losers die. Or use the positive difference. You subtract them and take the absolute value. If you have horse and foot, horse beating foot, then you add them together. Foot, foot, horse, horse, mixed, mixed. It's just the winners die for how many prisoners you take. Again, the Swiss take no prisoners along with Turks. Count prisoners as additional kills. So basically you just get bonus kills because of the prisoners you take. A guard of 1 man per 5 prisoners must be maintained at all times. Prisoners escape. Escape prisoners may fight normally in the turn following escape. So something else that's confusing is when it says man. Does man mean a person? Like, because one mini is 12 people. So when it says man, early, like right at the beginning, it said fighting man. Like, I think it even said like 1 miniature is 20 fighting men. So when it says man, does it mean, like, I don't know how you do divisions of the minis. Like, oh, I killed 1/3 of this mini. So I would just do 1 man as 1 mini. So unless you're doing, I guess if you're doing the individual rules where you're doing 1 mini equals 1 person, then you could do it as 1 man per 5 prisoners. But really this would be a guard of 20 men per 100 prisoners. Now that's pretty brutal. If you roll a 6, then you kill 120 units just from the prisoner system. So that's pretty brutal. And if we're going to use the... Where are they? If we're going to use these images as an example. Well, 6 isn't that many compared to this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a pretty big chunk of this fighting force. Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to play it to know. I don't know what happened to my highlight. Whatever. I guess it disappears when the page deloads. Impetus bonus. Heavy foot, armored foot, and all horse units receive impetus bonus when they charge into melee across smooth, level terrain. Oh, these are more optional rules. Oh, when it says optionals, it means optional rules. So there's one above that was called optional, like firing optional, fire optional. Also, this is an optional rule, whether or not you miss with the catapult. Heavy foot, armor foot, and all horse units receive impetus bonus when they charge into melee across smooth, level terrain or down moderate slopes. Such troops add an extra die to their normal number shown on the combat tables. I don't understand this combat table. It just says refer to the combat table, and like it doesn't make any sense. So this is historical information, man-to-man, jousting, and then fantasy supplement. Let's go back to the other appendixes and see. For the fantasy system, this is jousting. Man-to-man melee table. Oh, this is the system from AD&D. Roll 2 dice, score equal to the number shown kills. So if you're doing man-to-man, which is the predecessor to D&D, then if you have a guy with a dagger versus a guy with plate armor, you need to roll 12 on 2d6, which is actually harder than rolling 12 on a d12 to kill him. If man dismounted prone for 7 or better kills. So if you knock them off their horse or they're laying on their back, then you only need a 7 to kill them. Because they're wearing super heavy armor. That makes sense. I don't know why it's only with specific weapons. So dagger, sword. Oh, because they're stabbing weapons. So you just stab them in the heart. That makes sense. Combat tables. This seems like the most important part of the whole book, and it doesn't explain what's happening. Yeah, I don't know. I have it sitting right here, and I don't get it. Let's go back and see if it explains it somewhere. I feel like this is critical to understanding all the combat in this entire game. This reminds me of a feeling I had. This reminds me of a feeling I had my entire life trying to learn AD&D. I didn't understand how combat works at all. In fact, I found those books from in my dad's storage when I was 8. I've read them off and on every couple of years, and I'm now 23, and I still barely know how the combat works in Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. It makes no sense. So the combat here also makes no sense. Like, all the other rules make perfect sense, like the way that cannons and catapults work. I mean, it took me a little bit to think about it, but it works. You just fire the cannon, and you make some dowels ahead of time, and you either hit or you don't. I mean, it works. I don't understand the melee system. And this is all optional rules. It doesn't even have to do with morale, historical characterization. This is all optional stuff. Let's go back up. Cannon. Melee casualties will be determined by rolling certain numbers of dice. Sorry, that was my phone. Melee casualties will be determined by rolling certain numbers of dice and evaluating the scores for the combatants from each side of the combat tables given herein. Okay, it's right here. That's it? That's all it says. This is literally all that it says about melee combat. Place armored foot with extra die for weapons. For every 2 men so attacking is additional mesh. Yeah, they just left the rules out. They're just not here. Well, that's annoying. And then it goes into post-melee morale. Is this like a dash, like 1 die per man? Because what I'm looking at is, this looks like -1 die per man. So... Oh, okay. This is. I was reading all of this completely wrong. So I was reading this as -1 die per man. So you have like a set number of dice, you take them away per man, whatever that means, and then 6 kills, whatever that means. Now I realize it. I think it's saying 1 die per man. If you roll a 6, you kill it. So okay. So if you have light footmen, if you've got 4 light footmen. No, black. You got 1 heavy horse. Then for every 4 light footmen you have, you get 1 die against 1 heavy horse. And 1 heavy horse gets 16 dice. And only 6 kills. And these kill on a 5 to a 6. So let's say you roll a 1, 4, 3, 4, 6, 6, 6, 6, 4, whatever. 4, 2, 1. I'll just do this. 1, 4, 6, 5, 6, 6, 5, 1. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 16. So you got 6, a 6, 6, 5, a 6, a 6, a 5. So that's 7 versus their 4. All 4 of these guys would die. And since combat happens simultaneously, these guys get 1 die. No, they get 16 die against them. No, I did that backwards. Sorry, I'm trying my best to understand this, but I'm hitting a eureka here. So we have, again, 4 light footmen. And we have 1 heavy horse. So we get 1 die per man. 1 per man. 4 per man. So we get 4 dice. And we need 6 to kill. And here we get 4 dice. 5 or 6 kills. So let's do 6, 4, 2, 1, 5, 6, 5, 1. So in this case, we get a 6, so we kill them. And we get a 5, 6, and a 5, so we kill 3 of them. I don't know when it says 4 dice per man, if that means that you get 4 attacks so you can kill 4 units. That has to be what it means. You kill 4. You can kill up to 4 units for every 5 or 6 you roll. For these 4 guys, you can kill. For each one, you can kill. No, it's 1 die per 4 men. Okay, I got it wrong again. Let's do this again. So we've got 4 guys, 1 horse. So this is like, this is probably how people feel when they do Thaco. They're like, I have no idea what the fuck's happening. So heavy horse, 1 die per 4 men. Let me just make sure there's a recording. Yep. 1 die per 4 men. So this is 4 men. This is 1. You get 1 die. And then heavy horse versus Lightfoot gets 4 dice. 6, 6, 6, 4, 1. So they roll 6, so he dies. He rolls a 6 and a 6. So 2 die? Or does just 1 die? I think 2 die. When it says 4 dice per man, I think it means... What I think this means is you get... So we have Lightfoot versus Heavy Horse. Lightfoot gets 1 die per 4 men. And on a 6 it kills. So we have a Heavy Horse versus Lightfoot. You get 4 dice per man. 5 or 6 kills. So I think this means they get to attack effectively 4 times, whereas 4 Lightfoot against 1 Heavy Horse gets to attack effectively once. I mean, that's the most extreme example. But, yeah, okay. So, now we understand how the combat table works. Let's go back through the melee section and see if there's anything that we skipped over. Here's what the classifications are for the chart. Involve the number of dice allotted to them for their melee entries by the combat tables. Casualties are removed, and morale for both opponents is checked. Okay, so this chart is basically all of combat. Flank attacks, rear attacks. the morale system still doesn't make any sense to me, because like the side with fewer casualties is not always the opposite of the side with the greater number of surviving troops. That just doesn't make any sense to me. Okay. Okay. So if heavy foot, armored foot, and all horse units are charging against smooth level terrain, they add an extra die to their normal number. So does that mean an extra die per man? Medium horse. Does it mean an extra die per man? I really don't know. I think it just means you take this number and you add 1. So this becomes 3, this becomes 3, this becomes 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. If you have armored foot against light foot and they're charging. Or no, it's heavy foot, armored foot. Oh, yeah, okay. Armored foot. So armored foot against light foot charging, you actually get 2 dice per man instead of 1 die per man. Okay. When standing, horse will defend normally but will return casualties to the next lower category. So horses defend normally, but they attack 1 lower when just standing. So, in my example before, technically, oh, they actually get more effective. Okay, so if a heavy horse is not moving and it's fighting an armored foot, then it actually moves. It actually attacks like it's attacking a heavy foot. If it's not moving. Hedgehog. Oh, spaced out reading it in my head. That's dumb. Hedgehog. Only Swiss and Landsknecht pikemen can form a hedgehog. If 10 or more of these troops are in a square-type formation, pikes or polearms, 10 or more. Pikes or polearms facing outwards in all 4 directions. A hedgehog has been constituted. A hedgehog can be moved at 1/2 speed and may never charge. A hedgehog will never be drawn to neighboring melees. It may be attacked only by troops armed with like weapons. So basically, you form a invulnerable phalanx ball. So you become immune to any troops that aren't armed with pikes or polearms. How does that work exactly? So I guess they attack normally, like they usually do. But they can only be attacked by like weapons. So basically become an unstoppable killing ball that just moves really slow. I guess. Maybe they can't attack because they're in like a special formation. Then what's the point of the formation? I really don't know. That seems totally overpowered. And besides the fact that the Swish and the Landsknecht already get a whole bunch of like specific rules, like particular bonuses and stuff, this seems a little overpowered. It's like a god unit in an RTS that just can't die. But I'd have to try it. Morale. Instability due to excess casualties. When casualties from any and all causes exceed a certain percentage of a unit's original total strength, morale for that. Let me start over. Instability due to excess casualties. When casualties from any and all causes exceed a certain percentage of a unit's original total strength, morale for that unit must be checked by rolling 2 dice. If the loss is brought below the set percentage by missile fire, the units must check before the melee portion of the turn. If the loss is brought about by melee, must check morale after melee has been completed for that turn. If the unit remains stable, it need not check morale again until such time as the surface loses the stated percentage of its original strength. But at that time, it must be removed from the table for the remainder of the game. Okay. Okay, so I get this. So if you drop below 25%, you have to roll 2d6 and get an 8 or better to stay in combat. Or if you're mounted knights, you drop below 50%, you have to roll a 4 or better to stay in combat. And if you fail, you die. They die, basically. And if you're surrounded, you surrender and you become prisoners. So, if the unit remains stable, so if they win their die roll, they don't have to check morale again until such time as it suffers loss to the stated percentage of its original strength. But this is what I don't understand. If the unit remains stable, it need not again check morale until such time as it suffers losses to the stated percentage of its original strength. But at that time, it must be removed from the table for the remainder of the game. What does this mean? Because they only give 1%, right? Yeah, they only give 1%. 1 percentage. A certain percentage of check per roll on 2 dice. As long as you put below 7%. The unit remains stable, so I'm assuming that this means if the unit remains stable, that means that they pass. As long as the state percentage of original strength. Okay, so I think what this means is if you have, let's say you have 100 peasants. Minus 25%, which is 25. And you go to 75. Now you roll. Let's say you roll a 9. So, stable. But now they're at 75. But now they're at 75. Now, if they lose another 25%, they die instantly. They flee from combat. So this only matters for these guys right here. Or from like light to medium horse. Because for these guys, if you lose 50%, then you lose 50% again, you just die. So if you stay so the Swiss pikemen, the heavy horse, Norman knights, mounted knights. So these guys, if they pass their check, then they stay stable until they all die. But for these guys, they pass the check, they stay stable until they lose, in this case, 66 2/3. Or like, if they lose another third of their units, another fourth of their units, then they lose. Then they just get removed from the table and they die. Okay. That's how I interpret that. So any unit that fails to make the required score to remain in battle is removed from play immediately unless no route of retreat is open to it. Surrendered units that fail morale checks are assumed to immediately surrender. So this is like another morale system. Does this have anything to do with the other morale system? No, this doesn't have anything to do with the other morale system. So there's two morale systems. This one is just, if you lose over a certain amount, then you have to make a morale check. The other one is that after every combat, you also make another type of morale check, and I don't understand how that one works at all. Okay. Swiss Landsknecht Pike Charge. Because of the reputation and ferocity of these troops, an enemy charged by Swiss or Landsknecht pikemen, other than like troops, must roll 2 dice and consult the loss table just as if they had suffered excess casualties. So not only are these guys like god units that become invincible, but if they charge you, then you have to immediately check morale. However, if the unit being attacked fails to score high enough, it is not removed from play, or rather retreats 1/2 move back to the enemy and must rally. If they are followed by the pike move, they rally units till only limits. Yeah, this is totally like Mary Sue. Like, oh, these units, they just instantly kill you. If they charge you, they can become immortal. They have better checks for everything, as far as I know, because I kind of skipped over them because I didn't really give a shit. If they charge you, you run away, and if they keep charging you, you die instantly with no check. So yeah. Cavalry charge. In order to withstand a charge, and I get the idea of, like, sometimes it's fun to have like god units. Sometimes it's fun to just have like really tough units. So I totally get that, and I think that Gary got that too when you get to the fantasy supplement, and like some of those units just blow, like literally, so like the wizards just set off like nuclear explosions and just blow shit up. So I get that it's cool to have like super powerful units sometimes. So and you know, it's his book, and you didn't really expect many people to read it. So it's cool if you like. I think that's cool to have god units. I actually think it's kind of cool, but in terms of quote unquote balance, I'm doing air quotes with my hands. Probably not the most air quote balanced, but who cares about balance in D&D? Nobody. Well, players nowadays do, but I don't, so whatever. Cavalry charge. In order to withstand a charge by mounted men, the defending unit must check morale. Oh, so for cavalry, they have to check morale anyway. Fear of the charge was usually more dangerous than the impact of the cavalry. That actually makes perfect sense. Units that fail to score the required total retreat 1.5 moves. Backs to the enemy must rally. If both units are charging, both must check morale, adding 1 to the dice score of foot and 2 to the dice score of horse. So you get a bonus of 1 to your morale check if you're also charging, if you're a footman, and bonus of 2 to your dice score of your morale check if you're a horseman and you're also charging. These are the morale checks. Light, medium, or heavy horses. So if you're a peasant and a group of peasants and there's heavy horses charging at you, you gotta roll 11 or 12 to withstand them. Or if you're charging back, then you only need 10, 11, or 12 on a 2d6. Swiss and Landsknecht armed with pikes or polearms facing the enemy automatically stand any charges. So again, they're immune to charges. be cool if they had this rule for anything. Like if you're getting charged and you have pikes or pole arms or staves or spears, like in AD&D where you can set a spear for a charge and then they charge into your spear. It'd be cool if it had rules like that. But I get that that's complicated and you gotta call ahead of time and it's like, no, you're not doing anything. Both sides are sitting there planting their spears in the ground. Okay, next turn. Both sides are sitting there planting their spears in the ground. Next turn, it gets boring. Historical characteristics. I think I'm going to cut it off here, and then I'll come back and start from here. Because we've been going for, I think, like an hour and a half, if you include this video and the one before I cut it. So, yeah. See you in the next section.